So what does a day look like for your average developer? In this case, it's an optimized day. The day usually starts up with a stand-up meeting. This is a meeting that's really meant for the individual team to talk about what they're working on, what they did yesterday, and if they have any issues. And then separately, after we get a good status on what people are working on, we'll break out into these working sessions. This will sometimes be called a parking lot, but the idea is to identify stuff that other people need help with or that you can help with and saying, hey, let's go have our own little meeting and breakout discussion about this. The rest of the day is coding. That's the developer's primary function. If a developer is in a meeting, they are not coding. And if you find them coding in a meeting, they're not paying attention and they're probably also not doing very good coding. And so the objective for any given developers is to spend as much time coding as possible. And so the calendar, the optimal calendar, really revolves around getting as large of chunks of time as possible for doing coding. This is to avoid context switching and because focus is required in order to execute that job. That's why in the middle of the day, we like to have our lunch followed by any post-lunch meetings. You just can't work in a vacuum, so there are going to be sometimes daily team meetings to do things like discuss features. What are you working on? What's coming down the pipe? After that, another very common aspect of coding in any environment is a concept of code review. That's having somebody else look at your code, talk about your code through them, and there's some very specific guidelines for what we want to achieve in this in combination with the tooling we're supposed to have in place. The rest of the day is meant to be coding. Low interruption, hands-on keyboard, do your work. But wait, that's not what my day looks like. I spend most of my day in meetings. If that's the case, it's sometimes up to the individual developer to take charge of their own schedule. Again, if you are in a meeting and you are not coding, you are not getting work done. And if you find yourself coding in a meeting, you have to ask yourself, if you're not paying attention in that meeting, are you really getting any benefit from it? So it's really important, whether it's a management issue or an individual issue, to focus an individual's developer schedule on as much coding time as possible. Because the last thing you want is have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning because it's the only 2 hours you're going to get in the day to code, and then having to work late into the evening. Those 14, 16-hour days are simply not sustainable and are going to result in burnout.